Hey, everybody, what is going on? Welcome back to Unknown Destination, the podcast where we talk about travel. My name's Justin. That's Andrew. Both of us have a background in corporate travel. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a little bit dreary this morning in Michigan, but not too chilly. So probably get some stuff done today after we're done.
Yeah, here in Missouri, it's raining, and it's supposed to rain basically the rest of the day, and then it's going to be sunny for 2 days, and then it's going to rain for a week again. But it didn't rain all summer, so I guess that's good.
Yeah, we had a nice 70-degree day a couple days ago, and then the very next day was 30. So
We
Michigan weather.
we had 82, and then mid 30s.
Yeah, yep, yeah. I don't miss that at all.
Yeah. So anyway, let's just kind of jump right into it. First thing that I wanted to bring up was that I saw some announcements from Southwest Airlines, and one of them's actually kind of a big deal. They are adding some new routing. It will begin in February and March of 2022, but the biggest thing is that they are going to be adding service to O'Hare Airport in Chicago instead of just flying out of Midway.
Wow, that's actually pretty big news. I hadn't heard that yet, but I know that is one of the main reasons as to why people normally, or corporate travel, I should say, don't normally fly Southwest is just because of they don't want to go through the smaller airport just to fly on Southwest. They'd rather
Yeah.
hub through O'Hare.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a big deal. And as far as leisure travelers, honestly, if you're flying leisure, Midway is significantly more convenient because it's kind of downtown and you don't have this long drive into the city. But as far as corporate travel, when you're going to the outskirts of Chicago, it can take you forever, and there's a lot more transportation options coming out of O'Hare. It looks like the flight that was actually announced, and it was announced yesterday, was from Phoenix to O'Hare beginning on February 14th. One-way tickets are going to be about $109, and it looks like there's going to be 4 flights a day. As of now, there is already service, obviously, from Phoenix to Midway, so these will be additional flights kind of aimed more at that corporate traveler. And then on top of that, actually coming out of Phoenix starting on March 11th, they will now be offering service to Colorado Springs, so another new destination for Southwest.
That actually kind of plays onto something that I was listening to the other day about the airlines being more versatile with their routing, and it kind of contradicts what I was hearing just from an international standpoint of airlines such as Qantas that are able to put routes together within a week, and how the old way of doing it was this Southwest approach, or any airline really, where they would let you know months in advance that they were doing a new routing. But due to kind of post-COVID, the airlines are having to be a lot more versatile and quick to get these routes established while the demand is there. So I'm wondering what kind of information Southwest has that they think, you know what, not right now, but maybe February. That's still kind of a ways off.
It is, and you got to wonder how long they've been planning those routes. Like you said, I mean, a lot of times when you see a new airline route, it's been in the works for over a year, and they've just been trying to figure out that destination. And I think what you're referring to, there was actually a YouTube video that came out from Windover Productions kind of talking about routing and how quickly they've been making changes recently. One of the big ones was Qantas. They were making flights from I forgot what airport it was, but it was one of the airports in the southern part of Australia going to the northern part of Australia, and it was a week that they made the plans for that flight and put it into service. And one of the biggest reasons that a lot of airlines were doing this was because they were getting government help, and with that government help, they still had to keep a certain number of routes operating. So the goal was to put as many short routes in as possible, and that's definitely the case here in the U.S. As far as that particular route, the northern part of Australia actually opened up the borders to the southern part, so there were actually people traveling there, so it was the only way they could make money. So a lot of things being moved around just so these airlines can bring in some sort of income.
Yeah, I think the craziest thing about what you were mentioning with the government funding of the stipulations that the airlines are having to go through, which I think the craziest one that I saw was the American Airlines one, where it went Dallas, Eagle County to Aspen to Montrose. So you think like those 3 cities are within like a 50 to 75 mile radius. But they had to comply with the federal law where they were going to be servicing all of the same airports that they were servicing pre-COVID in order to get this money. So they're basically running these these flights empty just so that they can still receive their federal bailout money.
Yeah, and they're trying to make all the routings on these flights as short as possible so they're wasting the least amount of fuel because, like you said, those flights between Eagle County and Aspen and Montrose, most of the time there's nobody on them, especially because Colorado's been really one of the strictest states with stay-at-home orders, and none of those cities have been allowing people to come in to do anything, so you're just flying an empty plane.
Yeah, exactly. With the government funding running out here at the start of this month of October, that's a lot of airlines are kind of dumping those more regional routes just to put pressure on their own senators to get these bills passed for their bailout money. So, they're really pushing these. When somebody loses their routing, say Flint, that's a pretty small airport, and all of a sudden all their routes get cut and people are having to drive to Detroit, which is an hour and a half away, to take a flight. A lot of backlash from the local communities. So interested to see if I know that there's been a few states that have already caved and supplied their own relief to the airlines so that they will continue flying out of these regional areas, but I guess we'll see in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting that you actually mentioned Flint, because another one kind of in the same area with Grand Rapids was one of the main airports when I was doing corporate travel that I was booking to, because one of my accounts was based there. And I know as far as the corporation that I was working with at the time, they're not doing any travel because the flights aren't there, so they'd have to drive to Detroit, and it's just not worth it when they can do everything virtually now. So again, you're in a situation where if a company can do it virtually, why fly? And then the airlines aren't making money, and we're just kind of in a situation where there's no money coming into the airlines, there's no government help now, and they're kind of at the worst point that they've been since all of this started.
Yeah, and that's still staying on kind of the airline subject, but just a side note that the virus numbers have been higher than they were at the beginning of the pandemic, but people are not realizing that, or they don't want to realize that when everybody was stuck in their homes for those first few months, we're at those levels again, but nobody's wanting or able to stay home because the government is acting basically like the election is the be all that we need.
Yeah, not to get too political again, but again, like we mention every time, it's kind of unavoidable when you're talking about the travel industry right now. As far as like stimulus and money going to the airlines, it's not happening right now. It's not going to happen until at least after the election. And honestly, there's a good chance it's not going to happen until January. So
next year.
Whenever we have our new Congress and Senate in place. So it's really hard to say what's going to happen, but traditionally, the winter is kind of a time when you see less travel anyway. It's the downtime for the entire industry. So going into downtime and making it even worse, it's going to be really interesting to see what carriers are able to survive this at this point.
Yeah, especially if you think about how this year has went, where how many people have, or just not even just corporate travelers, but how many people have travel credits that are going in through next year, or maybe these corporate travel not agencies, but the people that use the travel agencies, they don't have the budget anymore for traveling, or they've already used it. Most people's fiscal year is going to be September, October wrapping up. So they would be booking for the next year. So this, like Justin's saying, this is normally our downtime anyway from now until the end of the year. So I can't imagine anything really picking up. But a little bit more, I guess, optimistic is some other news that I heard from surprisingly United. I hate to say it, but I do like positivity. So I was seeing that
like positivity, hate United. Okay.
Yeah, basically. That they were turning their Guam airport hub into just basically a cargo cash cow, for lack of a better term. That they're trying to get their revenue any way they can, and they've never really used their Guam hub for basically anything from what it sounds like. And I mean, I've never booked anybody through their Guam airport, and but now they're using all of that as kind of like the waypoint into Asia for all these businesses that want to get their supplies over to Asian countries from the West Coast. So and they're still flying passenger planes. They're just flying them empty and just cargo belly. So that's kind of interesting to think about, that they went from essentially no flights from that Guam doing any kind of cargo whatsoever to hundreds of flights every week to kind of balance.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and there's a couple things I think of. First of all, you made me have to think if I've ever booked anybody to Guam, and I think maybe in all my years of travel, once or twice. But it's definitely interesting because United was one of the airlines that lost the least amount of money in the recent quarter, and you have to wonder that if that's part of the reason why that they've been able to adapt and make themselves basically a cargo airline for now. The other thing with it being Guam, with it being a U.S. territory, then they may not have to worry as much about restrictions with having to go through international airports, so it may be easier to move cargo through there, which is something that I didn't even think about until just now.
Or taxes.
Or taxes.
That's because a lot of those routings that you're going to get, like, think about how much taxes on an international flight. Yeah. Just in taxes alone. And then I would imagine that the cargo itself, that was one of the things I was reading, was that the cargo, they're able to do it and make a profit on these empty passenger planes because cargo's so high right now. It's like everything is so expensive to actually ship. So right. I thought it would be the opposite, honestly, just using like my own logic, but I guess that is completely wrong.
It's interesting to think about that, though, because, I have kind of a hobby on the side trying to make extra money selling things on eBay and stuff like that. And even local delivery services, USPS has raised their prices just for the holiday season this year, as well as UPS and FedEx seeing price increases. So even domestic shipping is going up on things. So I can only imagine how much that's affecting the international markets.
Yeah, one of the most interesting things I think for us here in the U.S. is seeing how many random routes are popping up that we would never normally see. But because of all these airlines that are competing for kind of more leisure destination getaway type of things, the one that comes to mind is Southwest, because they the want to get away fares. They've been advertising to leisure travel forever. Their whole point to point system, instead of having to fly a double connection for no reason, they were one of the first to open up international flights again to Mexico, into Cabo. I can't imagine how much money they're making on it. It's probably a lot, because there's a lot of people that are going stir crazy, and Mexico is one of the few international, I put in quotes because you can pretty much, I don't consider Mexico true international, but it's one of the few that hasn't closed its borders to U.S. citizens to crazy restrictions that you're seeing everywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, since the beginning of this, you've basically been able to fly into most Mexican states, and Cabo relies on the tourism industry to stay afloat. That's their main source of income, so it doesn't make sense for them not to let people in as long as they're finding ways to, mitigate the virus, which I don't know if they are or not. I haven't done that much research on it, but in a lot of cases, even here in the U.S., money comes first. Now, it's interesting. We've seen price decreases on a lot of different routes going through COVID, because they're just trying to get people on. Right now, it looks like one-way tickets from St. Louis to Cabo, which is always going to be a little higher because there's usually at least one connection, but anywhere between $300 and $400, but the flights are pretty highly sold, so you're looking closer to $500 to $600. That's actually kind of high for that normal routing. It's normally in the $300 to $400 range, so they're making the most off of the people that want to travel and charging a little higher for those routes, and that's helping keep them afloat.
Yeah, from what I was seeing, it's not just, it's pretty much, there's every destination, because Mexico relies a lot heavily on American tourism into those kind of tourism hotspots. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the airlines kind of battling for that kind of, routing.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I was also looking, we discussed kind of the other three major carriers and how much money they'd lost year over year, or how much their income was down. And it was in the upper 70% for both Delta and American. It looks like for Southwest, it's only about 60%, which is still an insane amount, but it looks like they're able to handle this better because of their focus on leisure travel.
Yeah, that's the only other thing I really had on the airline industry, I guess, for this week was that I saw that Qantas had put their A380s into long-term storage, which I thought was really interesting because they announced that they were going to put it in until 2023. So that's when they're thinking
Yeah.
kind of it'll be back to levels where people are traveling enough to warrant the A380s. But the fact that they're putting them into long-term storage instead of scrapping them, like a lot of airlines, you see that where they'll have a line of, maybe aircraft that they didn't, underperformed, and they just scrap it to kind of cut their losses and move on. But to put, an aircraft that's 3 years away, they're putting all of these aircraft into storage until then. So that's kind of like an optimistic thing, I would say, that they do believe that things will get back to normal to a certain extent. It's just going to take time. So I guess that's a little bit of optimistically good news.
It is. And when you're talking about airline storage, or aircraft storage, it's not like parking your car. There's a lot of expenses involved in that because they do actually have to maintain the aircraft. They're basically looking at it on a weekly basis, making sure that everything's still in good condition. There is an airport in California where almost every airline has their aircraft right now, and it's a warm, dry area, so there's no worries about like rust and things like that. But there's just a lot more maintenance that goes into it. So they're still spending money on these aircraft because of that belief that something's gonna come back in the future. So that's definitely positive news.
Yeah. I was kind of looking into domestic flights kind of around the world to kind of see how everybody was bouncing back. And it does look like those countries that were able to curve the virus early are almost back to a normal state of their own, internal travel. That's including China. Wow. I saw Wuhan, the epicenter of the virus. They were back to their normal flight schedule within 6 months of when the virus happened. And New Zealand, Australia, all these other countries that, are seeing that they're opening up, that were able to curb it. They're at either back to where they were or higher than they were pre-COVID, because international is going to be a mess for quite a while. But at least it's another one of those hopeful, at least for people who like to travel, hopeful news that you might be able to travel to one of these places, even if you have to sit in a quarantine.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, you say the countries they handled it well. Unfortunately, the U.S. is one of very few countries that is still having problems as far as being able to have domestic flights and stuff like that. And that's not a political statement. It's just a fact. We haven't really recovered from this, and things are really getting worse than they've been since the beginning of all of this. And because of that, there's so many unknowns.
Right.
I kind of want to go back for a minute because we were talking about the A380, and as of right now, there is not a single A380 in operation on any airline anywhere in the world. They are all currently parked, and that's something that's crazy because the A380 and then the Boeing 777 Dreamliner, they were kind of, competing to be the big new supercarrier that everybody would use. A lot of them, especially with Emirates, have that really luxury business and first class, and now to just see them just sitting there is crazy because they were kind of expected to be what took over every international flight.
Yeah, all the long hauls we're going to be using those, and then it's they got a month of use in. Some of them probably didn't even see hardly any use.
Yeah, well, it's just crazy.
I think that's I didn't have anything else for airlines for this week. That was honestly quite a bit of news that was coming out. I know that last week there wasn't too much going on with it because they were kind of everything was kind of in limbo, but everything within the past probably 3 or 4 days. So it kind of works out that we didn't do this on Tuesday like we normally do, because a lot of this stuff we wouldn't have had. A lot of my information was yesterday and the day before, but that would have been, we would have missed out on all this till next week.
Yeah, same. And again, we apologize that we're a couple days late, but scheduling just didn't work out. It'll happen occasionally, but I'm glad we didn't because you're right. There's been a lot of information since then. Some of it still negative, but a lot of it positive about new routings and things that airlines are doing to stay afloat so that when the industry is able to recover, they're able to meet up with the demand.
Yeah, absolutely. Just I think this was probably one of the most positive weeks for airline or in the airline news. Just seeing these companies like the big companies like United that you think they've never done anything really with leisure, and they're like, well, shoot, guys, we need some money. We need to figure something out. And they switched to cargo, and they're fighting in the leisure market now. It's competition is always good, and it's always good for the customer. It's always good for businesses. It makes businesses better. That's why we have certain laws in effect. So the law, I mean, the competition just needs to stay there, and we'll see who adapts the best. That's who's going to come out of COVID alive as a company, is the ones who are willing to adapt and try new things.
Yeah, and honestly, it looks like almost all the domestic airlines are doing a decent job of doing that, with the exception of Delta's made some changes to do cargo stuff as well. Southwest has changed their routing to do things, and even American was changing their routing to be able to keep their funding coming in. So it seems like every large major carrier, all the big players, are doing what they can, and I think they're all probably going to survive.
Yeah, I think so too, especially with the government help during the beginning of it. As long as nothing goes back to kind of a countrywide shutdown again, I think they'll be fine. And but so switching gears into the hotel world, I did see something that was really I thought was really cool. So I'd kind of been hearing rumors of like a work from home package that some hotels were going to be trying to do.
Okay.
So for those that are having to work from home, which is, was 99% of the country for months. Right. So they're kind of, taking their time on this. I think you'd think that this would have happened already for a while, but, better late than never with how things are going. But Marriott is going to be joining. Hyatt was the first brand to do this, where they've got you can get a check-in time of 6 a.m., check out at 6 p.m., work from the hotel all day. There's Marriott. I'm more familiar with their packages than Hyatt. I actually hadn't even heard of Hyatt doing this, so I don't know. They didn't, I guess, advertise as well as Marriott is. But so Marriott's doing 3 different packages that you can do, basically for those that are stir crazy at home and just need a day out to work from. So their day pass, they're doing it in certain airports. The day passes. Or not airports, I'm sorry, certain cities. Yep. So they've got Atlanta, Phoenix, Dallas, New York, Toronto, London, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, and Hong Kong. So basically what you get with that is you get an enhanced Wi-Fi and access to any kind of business services that you need. So that would be including your printing, faxing, all and above. And then if you have status with with Marriott, then obviously your perks are going to increase. They said that obviously the rates are going to vary, but the Westin Atlanta and the JW, it's $99 for the day. So not bad for somebody who really is, that type of person who needs to be out. I know a lot of people are, kind of getting a little bit stir crazy.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I know, just from experience with my wife working at a hotel, a lot of hotels have been lowering their prices to try to attract leisure travelers, but being able to attract business travelers by giving them a day rate from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. is definitely an interesting process. I would assume that means that room's still out of service to the next day when the housekeeping staff comes in, but they're still making more money than a leisure traveler and appealing to the business market. So...
And they're able to it's funny that you say that, because I believe that they're still keeping those rooms for late night check-in. They're able to actually, since it's a 6 p.m. checkout, if there's they're able to get I think it's a 3-hour turnaround if they need it. So they could have somebody that if somebody does fly in on a later PM flight, they could potentially get a room that they wouldn't have normally been able to get.
I can't help but wonder if that's also helping the hotel increase their staff or being able to keep people on, because, traditionally I've worked in a hotel as well in the housekeeping department, and generally you have everybody in the housekeeping department leaves around 4:30, 5 o'clock. So it sounds like with that, being able to use the room again, it means they're employing, evening housekeepers that would have to come in and clean these rooms. So that's probably good for job growth as well.
Yeah, I would think so. So that's the first package that they're offering, which obviously that's only certain cities right now. But Marriott has announced that they want to do that pretty much everywhere, if possible, if the demand is there. They're from the sounds of the cities, that it's the bigger ones. But the next one is a stay pass, and it's basically the same thing except it's an overnight. Okay. But that obviously rates are going to vary there as well.
Right. Well, speaking about hotels, I actually just found an interesting article that was posted today, actually 11:45 a.m., literally less than an hour ago. Wyndham Hotels posted their profitability report for the year, and they have remained to stay profitable in 2020.
That's crazy. So they another one of those adapting to survive, but not even survive, but thrive.
Yeah, they're still not to their 2019 performance levels, which you would expect. Obviously, they've seen a decline in business, but by being a brand that has a lot of focus on the budget traveler, they seem to have been able to keep their income up there. And, Wyndham, one of their biggest brands is La Quinta, La Quinta, however you want to say it. Everybody says it differently, but that's definitely a budget hotel, but it tends to be one of the nicer budget hotels. And I think because of that, they've been able to stay without losing money, which it's crazy that any hotel chain's been able to do that.
Anything in any business in the travel world really to be profitable in 2020 is enormous. And I would say even probably just from our kind of expertise in the matter, I would say probably 2021 is going to be the same. If you're profitable in 2020 or 2021, you're probably doing something right. And as for La Quinta, I've stayed in a few La Quintas and I've never had a problem with any of them. Some people say they're really hit and miss, but I've personally never had any problems with them.
I've had older La Quintas that I've stayed at that have been kind of but they were still decent rooms. They were just old. And then I've been at new ones that honestly rival high-end Hilton hotels, that they're so nice. So you never know what you're going to get, but you're going to get a decent room. And honestly, in my opinion, as far as the breakfasts that are offered by hotel chains, they're one of the best.
Yeah, and again, the rate, plus you're getting those kind of loyalty points for, it being one of their properties. So
right.
The last pass that Marriott's offering is the Play Pass. So this is probably going to be more, I think it's going to be bigger than what people are thinking. So this is more family oriented for people that are having to work from home. So they're offering like a dedicated business concierge, supervised kids activities. So it's basically a daycare. Dedicated office and study spaces, and then other curated experiences based on where the location is, depending on the property, of course. And it's, again, if you're a Bonvoy member, they're going to be offering more things. But, I mean, that sounds pretty fantastic because it could just be like a little getaway. Maybe you still have to work because I know a lot of companies with it being everyone's working from home. A lot of people are working weekends now. So maybe you and the family want to get away for the weekend, but you're still having to work, and you go to the hotel, you go to one of these resorts that's offering this, one of the Marriott properties, and you're able to know that, I personally would feel a lot more comfortable with somebody, quote unquote, babysitting my kid in the same building that I'm working from, that I'm able to relax, with my wife or, significant other, that kind of just like you're not stuck in the house situation.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. And I mean, it makes sense for those hotels to add that package and have some sort of daycare on site. Because again, you're getting more people employed. And two, a lot of places, they're not allowed to have these large gatherings. So their ballrooms and conference centers are just sitting empty most of the time. So why not open a daycare and be able to let people work from their hotel room?
Yeah, that's honestly, when I was reading that earlier, that it kind of blew my mind that they hadn't thought about trying that before.
It is kind of crazy that it doesn't exist already.
Yeah, because you think about the meeting rooms, especially when all of this started happening, that they could have converted that pretty easily into some kind of kids area, especially if you're taking all the precautions that the government's saying you have to anyway, where all these properties, they're checking temps and stuff like that when you're coming in, and a lot of places, I don't think they're really doing any kind of testing at the locations, but a lot of people are getting tests before they leave, so a lot of people are pretty secure with their health.
Yeah, in my experience with hotels right now, the staff is definitely checked every day that, as far as temperatures and things like that. They have to fill out forms about COVID screenings and things like that. I know Hilton has implemented this new Stay Clean program. They partnered with Lysol to where once a housekeeper cleans your room, they actually seal it with a door seal, and then nobody else is allowed in that room until the guest goes in that room. Now,
That's
honestly,
actually a good idea.
it's a good idea, but at the same time, how effective is a sticker that you can probably just take off and put back on? I don't know. But
Yeah, it depends how much you trust the actual property, I guess.
right. And obviously that's going to depend everywhere. Hilton doesn't own its own hotels for the most part, and basically no company owns their hotels. They sell their licensing rights to have their name on it. So what you're going to get, even mentioning Wyndham, what you're going to get is going to kind of vary depending on who actually owns the property. But I think for the most part, most people feel pretty safe staying in hotels right now, and I think for the most part it is. You're basically staying in a room by yourself the entire time, and it's not like you're going to have that much interaction. So, if you're local and want to take a side trip or something like that on the weekend, it's definitely something I think you can do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's as someone who's very hesitant about traveling right now, even though I'm, shaking. Basically, my legs are shaking, ready to get back traveling, trying to find an excuse to go somewhere. That's one of the few things that I think I would be pretty comfortable with is hotels right now, just because they're probably getting cleaned more than your house is. I would hope so, at least. And not to mention, like Justin's saying, there's nobody else that's going to be in that room. You think the housekeeper, that's it. So
yeah,
the odds that your housekeeper is going to be, transferring that to you is probably pretty low since they're cleaning everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know for a fact the hotel, at least the one my wife works at, is cleaner than the house because she's there more than she's here. So,
right. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I'm with you on the urge to travel, especially with all these fires going on in Colorado. That's one of my favorite places to visit, and I want to get back. I'm afraid stuff's not going to be there
right
before I can go. So.
Keeping on the hotel train that we're kind of rolling on here, I've got a UK update that the hospitality is not getting any kind of recovery until 2023.
That doesn't surprise me all that much, though. I
think
doesn't
really me either.
Is kind of where you're going to see any type of recovery throughout the industry.
Yeah, and that's it looks like, let's see, for 2021, they're forecast to be 55% across the UK for hotel capacity. So you think a lot of places that usually run 85 to 100% capacity, and they're only running at 55 for the entire year, the kind of losses that they're taking.
Yeah. As far as hotels here, I know as of right now, within St. Louis County, they're able to operate at 100%, and that kind of varies based on the city and state that you live in. Something else I wanted to mention, though, with housekeeping is a lot of properties, if you're staying multiple days right now, you can either opt out or they'll automatically opt you out of having housekeeping each individual day, so you don't have somebody coming in and out of your room. Keep in mind, you can always go to the front desk to ask for towels or just ask a housekeeper for towels to switch them out for you, but even then, less people coming in and out of your room is obviously a positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's something that you're worried about, for sure. Like I said, that'd probably be one of the few things that I wouldn't be worried about is just how those housekeepers are, they're basically sweating Lysol at a certain point because they've just cleaned so many rooms that those are probably the few people that I would be okay with in my room if I was traveling somewhere or just wanted a night out.
Sweating Lysol. Yeah, you're pretty right.
Just a constant aroma of cleaning supplies.
Yeah.
That's all I really had for hotels. I hadn't seen too many other updates. Kind of the same old country and worldwide, where just kind of trying to think of new ways to increase their revenue, keep their shareholders happy. Just a lot of optimism, though, even in the hotel industry. Yeah, they're saying 2023 is when everything's going to be back to normal, or at least travel's going to be there. But at the same time, they're coming up with all these other ways to stay afloat / be optimistic until then. So I'm curious to see what that will bring, what hotels will look like by 2023, to be honest. If it's going to be more, if they're going to move away from meetings and events, because let's be honest, meetings and events might not be here in 2023, like in
It's
the same
possible.
capacity that we had before. You're still going to have those big events, like, I just a couple that come to mind, like TwitchCon. That's enormous. PAX, you have PAX East and PAX West that does all those AAA games. Like you've got the Microsoft and Intel, the huge tech companies that attend those. So I don't see those going anywhere. You'll probably still have those in Boston and LA. But as for like the smaller events or even just work meetings, the work meeting and events, unless it's something major, I don't think that's ever going to come back, because this whole thing is kind of proven that we don't need that.
Yeah, and it's
unfortunately,
yeah.
for
you
us.
mentioned those, and the other things that come to mind, like VidCon out in Anaheim and Transworld, the big Halloween show here in St. Louis every year. But a lot of things about those conventions is they're already held in convention centers that are most of the time run by the city, and they're bringing in money for the city more than anything else. So I don't know how much those conventions really help other than people staying at the hotels. But you're right, other big events, I don't know how much you'll see. The one thing I expect to see an increase in, though, I think you may end up seeing more weddings being held within hotels in those conference rooms, because I think they'll become more competitive on deals within their ballrooms and stuff to keep them full. And I think you'll see additional job fairs in the years to come, because at some point the job market is going to recover, and it was in a good place. So
yeah,
we're going to get back to that point where it's going to be hard to find employees.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's been kind of switching gears, but I know there's been a lot of battle in the House between the two sides on, well, we need people to work. Nobody wants to work. And then it's just been a mess. But at the end of the day, people are going to have to work. And that's finding work that there needs to be more job fairs. Even now, there should be virtual job fairs going on, because, like you're saying, there are jobs, but a lot of times people don't even know that they're there, because all they see are those, the lower paying jobs where a senior programmer is not going to go do. A senior programmer that is, lives in an area where $150,000 a year is the lifestyle of that area, and you get 20 of those people that are laid off. They can't take the job that a 19-year-old could. That it doesn't work for their family. So I think that might be a really good opportunity for some of these places that aren't really using the space. I actually attended one virtual job fair. It was really interesting. It reminded me a lot of it wasn't live per se. They kind of had it set up like you would a normal job fair, where everybody had their booth and you could kind of click left and right to go to different booths. And then you would see all their information. You could apply directly on that. So it was actually even better than a job fair, in my opinion, because you could do everything at once without having to think about it. It was like, oh yeah, this looks interesting. Let's apply to this. And then they had a Q&A. So it was live in that aspect, but it was like still images. So you could tell they probably just set up, and then they were maybe they were there on a laptop or something so that they could answer. But it was really interesting. I was surprised that I haven't seen more of these yet.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting, and it seems like it works fine. I mean, I don't see why it's an environment that it wouldn't. I know a company that does a lot of call center work and contracts with people called Teleperformance is actually kind of handling it that way right now. What they do is when you apply through Indeed or whatever, they'll send you a Zoom link to their weekly office hours, and you can just go onto that Zoom at any given time during the week, and you'll be able to kind of see the positions available, talk to hiring managers for that position. So kind of the same thing you said, except for it's one company, but they just have a different person for each contract that they have available.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring them up, because they're actually partnering with my current company that has me furloughed to get people back working that have been laid off, as opposed to furloughed, where they're not going to be coming back once business comes back. So there's a lot of jobs out there. It's just, I think a lot of people are kind of overwhelmed with trying to find what they're looking for, because there are so many jobs right now. But then a lot of people can't just take whatever is available. Unfortunately, that isn't the way everything works.
Yeah, it's interesting that Teleperformance is working with your company because I know who you work for, obviously. They actually are one of the main partners with a different major corporate travel agency that I've worked with previously, and they are still hiring for that corporate travel agency. So what that agency did, my guess, is mostly laid off their internal employees. You are talking about a big difference in pay, though. When you work directly for an agency, a lot of times you're making $20+ an hour. When you're taking that position through a third-party company, you're around $13 an hour. But if you love working in travel and you want to stay in the industry, that's Teleperformance is an option right now. They are currently hiring travel professionals.
Yep. That's because they know that we've got the experience, the customer service aspect of it. So I would even suggest to anybody that's working in customer or that worked in customer service or has done kind of like a work from home, the telecommunicating, it's huge right now for the medical field. And a lot of these places that are wanting kind of like insurance specialists, they're willing to kind of give you the training / depending on what state you're in, because a lot of states have certain mandates or licensing that you need. They're even taking care of that. So options there.
So it's kind of funny that you mentioned that because starting November 9th, I'm actually going to be employed by a healthcare company. I just got the email literally while we were talking that they just confirmed I passed all of my pre-employment screenings. So yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so definitely a good field to get into. It's less pay than I was making before in the travel industry, but it's a solid job, and a lot of those jobs are Monday through Friday normal office hours between 9 and 5 p.m. So if that's something you're used to and you can't work weekends or work overnights, then that's definitely something to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 99% sure that the reason I'm still furloughed is because they know that I'm willing to put up with whatever they throw my way. That's the third shift, willing to take on basically any account and every account. I've handled, vice presidents of very, very large companies with relative ease. Sometimes their significant others are a little bit worse than they are, but I'm not going to name drop because that would not be good.
You wouldn't be furloughed anymore. You'd be fired.
Yeah, I would probably be let go and not hireable.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely says something. I know the people you've worked with. You've definitely worked with some high-end executives, as have I. But you're willing to work those overnight hours and those weekend hours that a lot of people aren't willing to put up with. Out of the dozens of people who are on like my Facebook friends list that I've worked with in the travel industry, you're one of two that hasn't been permanently laid off yet. So, no, good for you.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Honestly, I cannot describe how much I hate politics and everything about it. But I am so ready for this election to be over. Get out there and vote, obviously, like you've been told on every app you own on your phone, and probably with links on how to vote. But honestly, at this point, I just want it done so I can know if I'm going to be going back to work or not. There's a lot of things hanging in the balance for a lot of companies, not just my company, but anything that has to do with travel, tourism, meetings, and events. Is really hanging on this election because they're kind of holding all relief kind of hostage right now until the election is done. So I know that from a personal standpoint, my company is going to be looking at, okay, are they going to be extending unemployment benefits? Are they going to be extending it to the point where we don't have to worry about our employees for another X amount of months? Because I know that if unemployment gets extended, I'm furloughed for a longer time period because they've already said that. It just makes sense from a company standpoint to take advantage of the government help instead of going under. And that's, just like working for one of the 3 largest corporate travel companies in the world. And we've furloughed, 80% or laid off over 80% of the company is ridiculous that, COVID has hit that hard.
Yeah, and it's basically every major travel agency at this point that's been hit like that. Obviously, we're talking about the election. Like you said, go out there, make sure you're voting. A lot of places you can go vote early. As far as mail-in voting, it's pretty much too late for that. But the point that this video is going up, you don't have time because first-class mail just doesn't process that quickly. But if you can't vote, on Tuesday, go out and do it in person now. A lot of places
they do have the drop boxes. I did see an option where you can actually print out your ballot, and they've got drop boxes. So I would look into that in your state as well. I don't know if that's a state thing, but I know that you can do it in Michigan. So that's what I'll be doing because I missed the vote or the mail-in ballot.
Gotcha. Yeah, it is definitely a state thing. Missouri does not have drop-off boxes. However, you can drop it off the election authority, any county government center, and you can vote at the county government centers anytime during the week right now. So there's definitely options out there. Make sure your voice is heard. And obviously, we're kind of talking about stimulus. I think we both kind of have an opinion of which candidate would cause that stimulus to be passed. We're not going to discuss our preference on that, but it's important because a lot of these companies are looking for a certain candidate to be the one that's elected because that's the only way they think something's actually going to happen.
Or they think that's the only way that they might be able to survive. That's
right.
I mean, when I'm without doing any kind of I'm going to keep this undisclosed because we're not supposed to be really talking about this. But when you've got these, your big wigs on these meetings that are saying they're using terminology that as an individual you're kind of processing when they say we're going to be a leaner company. Everyone kind of knows what that means. It means that there's probably more layoffs going to be happening unless something turns around. And that's just because of the insurance situation in the U.S., where a lot of these companies, I've been blessed to be furloughed, so I haven't had to worry about health insurance for my family. But a lot of people don't have that luxury, as well as I don't know how long I'll have that luxury if something doesn't get passed, because that's a huge cost on my company for me not doing anything for them at the time.
Yeah, and you're very lucky. I don't think most of the major travel agencies have been able to keep up with that. Some have, some haven't, but it's a big deal that you're able to have that, and it's something that, honestly, it's kind of a problem in America as it is, being able to have health insurance. So to be able to keep it throughout COVID, that's huge.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that being in that nightmare of having to. I mean, you know how I am with the quarantine. I've been quarantining since January, since everything. Yeah. I heard it was even coming from Wuhan, or going to be. I just had a feeling that it would be hitting us sooner rather than later.
While we're kind of on the subject about jobs with travel agencies, for those of you who don't know, there's kind of a few major players in the corporate travel industry as far as travel agencies, and they are American Express, Egencia, Carlson Wagenly Travel, BCD Travel. Those are the four I can think of. Can you think of any others?
Ovation?
Ovation, that's another big one. And there's a couple others, but those are kind of the top ones. And BCD Travel actually announced that Zoom is really hurting their business even more. They have a total workforce of 14,900. They've just brought their layoffs up to 3,000 people, which is a fifth of their workforce. Not as bad as some of the other agencies, but they see Zoom taking a cut out of their future business. So they do have that belief that a lot of companies are going to go to doing all their stuff remote. And as far as BCD Travel, their stuff is all corporate. So if people are doing Zoom, they don't have business.
Yeah, no, and that I think that probably is another one of those. Not to really dump on BCD too much, but if you didn't see that coming as a travel company, that Zoom was going to be hitting your profits, you might want to reassess who's looking at your forecasting, because I could have told you that this past January that to invest in Zoom. Zoom is not just Zoom, but you think Zoom, Skype, any kind of conferencing software that can do what a meeting would normally do. Because even when all of this subsides, whether it's next year or if it's 10 years from now, people in the corporate world are still going to be video conferencing when they can. It's not going to go back to, you think, Justin, I just think about like the people that we used to book for who would travel to, they would go back and forth 7 times a week. They would do day trips. They're never going to do that again.
No.
Because there's no need to.
And unfortunately for some of them, otherwise they're not going to have their jobs because they're not going to be able to adjust to doing it virtually. And
Yeah.
that's just the reality. You know, a lot of people have been talking about a transfer of wealth going to the younger generations. I think right now you're going to see kind of a transfer of jobs because those people that are able to adapt and do things in a virtual environment are going to be the ones that are kind of taking over the job industry. So you'll see these people who may have been executives at companies for years losing their positions because they can't adapt to doing things on a computer.
Yeah, or just not the companies realizing that they're not necessary because maybe they were necessary in an office setting to, you know, keep the flow going. Maybe there were the micromanagers that, I mean, I was a huge micromanager when I worked in an office, and that's how I kept the office going. But I also, you know, we're not 80 years old, not willing to adapt. So that's unfortunately just the way it is. You have to be able to adapt. And if you, not even in the past, you know, 20 years, but you think even when our grandparents, everybody had to adapt at some point in their life, and those that adapted thrived, and those that didn't. So
yeah, and I'm definitely not saying that people who may be older can't adapt, because they can. It's just, in my experience, a lot of people don't want to. Especially working in travel, you know, systems kind of change all the time. The first thing I think of was when, like, Delta first started doing their waivers online and using Delta Pro for travel agencies. A lot of people
love that.
Yeah, I love it too. An American Sales Link and I forgot what United's is called, but basically every airline has switched to it, and that took the process from being more manual to being able to do things in a more digital environment. In my opinion, it's 10 times easier, but for somebody who's stuck in their ways and has been doing it the same way for 30 years,
that wants to call. Yeah, they want to call and speak to somebody, and then, you know, something like if you think about when COVID first started, and it was, you know, 6 hours of holding to get through to Lufthansa or to get through to one of these, sometimes you can't afford to wait that long for, you know, your traveler or your customer. And then being able to just go on their website, you know, you hit 3 buttons, you log in, and you got a waiver that you can just immediately, you know, you're good. You're not going to get dinged for down the line. It's you can't even put a price tag on it because it's just that much better. And then it also, when the customer says, well, geez, how did you do that so fast? And you tell them, well, luckily you're on Delta, and we've got a real good connection with Delta, and we can, Delta's really takes care of you guys. So, you know, I took care of you in 35 seconds, whereas I could have called for you and it would have taken 4 hours, or you could have went to the airport, stood in line for 2 hours. But you know what? I've got an email coming your way. You'll get in about 5 minutes.
And then they go to the airport, but you've already been in that person's ticket record, and the airport agent is just like, hey, I can't touch this. You have to call your travel agency. A lot of people don't understand that if you booked through a travel agency, a lot of times we're the only ones that can touch your ticket. And if you book through an airline, we can't touch your reservation. So where you booked it is where you got to go.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of gray area there. I will say that we got to put an asterisk next to what Justin said, where if you book it through a travel agent, because the airline ultimately will always have the final say in it. So think of it like I had a friend who got stuck when she was trying to get back during this whole pandemic, and they kind of tried to pull the same thing, saying, oh, well, you booked it through a third party, and she's freaking out calling me. And I told her, you know, the airline has to protect you. That's the law worldwide, is, you know, that if they just are all of a sudden not running a route, they have to put you on something within so many hours. There are guidelines. You're not just screwed in Korea. You're not going to be stuck in India. You know, there are things to protect you as the traveler. And sometimes, you know, obviously you're always going to catch more bees with honey. But sometimes you need to smack them. Maybe not a bee, but kind of you as a customer have to hold your ground as well. And I've learned that kind of the hard way traveling myself. Yeah. Maybe pick up a little bit of lingo if you're listening to us. That I would say that's not a terrible thing, because we once in a while we'll sprinkle some travel lingo in, and if you start using that in front of a gate agent, I'm just going to let you know you're probably going to get your way pretty quickly. And if you don't, then you're going to be able to talk to somebody who's going to be able to get what you want. You start throwing around abbreviations. I've noticed that they if they're kind of attacking you, they back off a little bit when they realize that, because they don't know who you work for or what kind of accounts you control
Right.
or the kind of power that you have. Not to say go on a power trip, but I have done that.
It's kind of funny that you mentioned that, because I caught myself when I said passenger record. I was about to say
Yep.
PNR, and I caught
Yep.
myself saying it. But that's kind of why it's important that if you are traveling and you have a preferred carrier, try to stay on that same alliance, because if you're flying on Delta and you're international, then if there's another airline within the same alliance, they'll
Korean.
reprotect you on their flight. Exactly, so you can be
Yep.
booked on Korean Air or whatever. And most airlines are within some sort of alliance, so it's easier for them to reprotect you.
Yep.
The exception to that is low-cost carriers like Southwest and even JetBlue and Frontier, and that's why you run a bigger risk when you fly them.
Ryanair.
Oh God, Ryanair.
Yeah, I would
Spirit.
honestly I would just stay away from international low cost carriers unless you're really trying to, sometimes the cost is, you can justify it. If you find a flight internationally for a couple $100 and you're not going to get dinged with all the extra baggage fees or seat selection, you don't care about any of that, you just want to get to your destination, by all means go for it. But you might be paying for that, because if you take the time off work and then their flights get canceled, they're not reprotecting you because they don't have any other flights.
Yeah, perfect example. Look back to what we were talking about with Iceland and WOW Airlines. They went bankrupt. Well, if they're bankrupt, they don't have anybody to reprotect you on another flight, and they have your money and you're stuck. So you're going to be paying out of pocket for a one-way ticket on some other airline.
Which that kind of leads me into another thing with a lot of kind of major credit cards now will protect you from those kind of situations. And we are not sponsored in any way by any of these credit cards, but I personally have the Chase Reserve card. It's their top tier travel credit card, and if anything like that were to happen, they reimburse me fully, even if the company goes under like that. So I would personally be okay with taking one of those budget carriers if the cost was could justify the means. But
yeah, a lot of credit cards now focus specifically on travel. Like you mentioned, Chase, American Express has always been one of the top leaders in protecting people in travel, and that's
Capital One,
just because they own their own travel divisions. Capital One is good about it. So that may be something we should do in a future episode, actually, kind of just talk about the different travel cards and the benefits, because a lot of them have them, and a lot of them include
compare them.
Yeah, a lot of them include lounge access and things like that too, which that's a huge benefit, because you may be talking about traveling internationally, staying at 3 different airports where you can have a layover and stay there. You get free meals, free drinks. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to booking your travel by using a credit card as opposed to using a debit card.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there isn't really any news going on in the kind of car rental world with Hertz going through bankruptcy. I do want to touch on this for the voting, though, that Hertz is doing free rentals on election day.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yep, they're doing that to try to help people get out and vote. There is a code to put in. It's 210350 when making a reservation online, or you can call and I'm sure they can help set you up. But that said that they are doing that. It's valid at any Hertz neighborhood location in the U.S.
That's
so
crazy.
They're doing
awesome.
Company wide. They're trying to make it easier to get places on election day.
And it does look like they have a 2-day minimum in order to do that.
Yep.
So yeah, that's that, and then a 28
keep that in mind. Yeah,
maximum. Yeah, but that's still great. So to be able to get people out there and doing their civic duty.
Yeah.
I have one other story that I just came across, and it's actually back to airlines, and it's about Southwest. And it's just that their corporate travel arm just changed their system and partnered with Amadeus. So they're now using Amadeus for their bookings, which is crazy. If you're not in the travel industry, you probably won't know what that means, but for Southwest to partner with a reservation system like that is something I never would have expected.
Yeah, so those that aren't too familiar with the business side of Southwest, they don't play with anybody else, and their business model has worked since their inception. They're one of the most profitable kind of airlines. They were the first to really challenge, I would say, the big three, the American, Delta, United, when they kind of introduced their system. Because they were the only airline that doesn't do like a giant hub. You're not having to fly into Dallas to get to somewhere. You're not having to fly through Detroit if you're with Delta. You're not having to fly through Atlanta. Like, they've got point to point. So, I'm just off the top of my head, the main route that I was thinking of when I was growing up was Flint to, it was somewhere in Florida, but it was a nonstop Flint to Disney basically trip, which is kind of wild to think about, that they were doing that. Their point to point system works and is profitable when you're flying out of a small city like Flint into a main location, like, around the Disney area, like Orlando, even Miami.
Yeah, that's crazy. Just one other quick thing to touch on with that Southwest thing. Southwest executive vice president actually had a quote about joining Amadeus, and I just kind of want to read it. It says, "By joining with Amadeus, we're continuing our mission of removing friction for corporate travel managers and travel management companies to make it easier and hassle-free to book and manage travel on Southwest." So for those of you that don't know, if you're a travel agency, you can't touch a Southwest reservation. Basically, it all goes through their website. We can change it for you, but honestly, most of the time, we're doing the same thing you could do on their website, or we're calling in. We do get a shorter hold time a lot of the times, but that's about it. In this case, Amadeus owns most of the major reservation systems that are available right now, as far as Amadeus, WorldSpan, Apollo, Travelport. That's all through Amadeus as a company, which means bookings will be available to be changed in all of those systems eventually. That doesn't mean much for the agencies that are focused 100% solely on Sabre, because that's not the partnership that they're with. But most agencies do have partnerships with multiple reservation systems. So obviously this is a little more industry speak. You're probably only going to understand what we're talking about if you work within the industry. But if for the future of travel and Southwest working with travel agencies, that's huge news.
Yeah, that's honestly, and it brings up something that I think we could talk about on a future episode as well, is kind of the status of because personally, when COVID was first starting, I heard of it was right when Lufthansa was starting to leave Sabre. Their contract had expired and they weren't renewing it. So that might be something that we could look into as well, is how this has kind of affected the airlines and their partnerships with the different reservation systems, such as Sabre, Amadeus, Apollo, Galileo, if anybody's still if that's still a thing, WorldSpan. That it's just it would be interesting to see if these other airlines kind of cut the middleman, cut the reservation systems because of cost. So that I'm going to actually jot that down for maybe that'll be a next week thing if I can get the research in before Tuesday, because I definitely want to spend some time on it.
I do too. That's definitely interesting because, like you mentioned with Lufthansa and stuff, some of those larger carriers are leaving the reservation systems, and then you see Southwest joining it, and it's just interesting to see airlines going two completely opposite directions.
Right. Yeah. I'm really curious about that. We're gonna have to read into that a little bit more, and that might be something that we can kind of add in for those that kind of want to know more about what we do as travel agents. So you kind of know what you're paying for when you're using a travel agent.
Yeah, knowing what we can do for you and the differences that are possible, definitely something that's interesting.
So I would definitely say that tune in next week, because I think it sounds like we're going to have quite a bit to go over. I know that we had quite a bit this week as well, but again, that was because we got a little bit later of a start this week. But like we were saying, I think it worked out in everyone's favor, since we got some of those last minute updates that may have been swept under the rug by next week. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm kind of glad we waited. Obviously, I think that's about all we have to talk about this week, but next week should be interesting. Hopefully, we'll get something up on Tuesday. As far as the week after that and the upload schedule after that, I'm not sure what it's going to be. I'm going to be working Monday through Friday during the day, so me and Andrew will kind of have to talk about when we can actually find time to record. But yeah, definitely come back for a listen next week, because I think there's going to be a lot of good information.
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, thanks everybody for tuning in. So from Justin and myself, thanks for traveling to our unknown destination. We'll see you next week.
See you guys later.